Everybody, I'm Matt Valley. Welcome to episode number 157 of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the insights and analytics pros that you trust. I have a wonderful guest here with me today. Her name is April Bell. Perhaps you know her. Perhaps you've worked with her at some point in the past. Well, I've known April for a few years. We both reside in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, see each other at all sorts of local events by the Insights Association and the UT Arlington Masters Program, all that stuff. But I'm really excited to finally have a chance to sit down and talk to April. Now, if you do know her, you know that she is the owner of a really unique innovation and insights company called Made with Empathy. What does that mean? Well, it means that there's so much power and empathy that can be applied to strategy, innovation, understanding consumers, all that good stuff. Her point of view is is very clearly articulated in this excellent book that she wrote, and I think it came out in 2001. Is that right? 2021. That's right. Firestarter, Igniting Innovation with Empathy. Super fun read, very useful in terms of understanding her way of thinking and the power of empathy. But also, I feel like having read this book, I really know April a lot better because it's got lots of great stories from her past that are illustrative of her thinking and some great client stories as well. So check that out. And she's actually kicking around some new ideas for the next big thing that she's thinking through. So I'm excited to talk about all that and more on today's podcast. So welcome to the show, April.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
Uh, I'm honored to have you. I have to say, and I know I mentioned this to you, there have been several people who have said to me, you really have to have April on the podcast. So, hey, we finally got that to happen. So, very excited to dig in.
Me
Now,
too.
before we get started, April, I do have to send a shout out to this company, Insight Sutras. It's a great company. They're sponsoring this episode of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast. Insight Sutras is a really outstanding operations and analytics partner based in India, working with all kinds of market research firms, consultants, independent researchers. They can take on as much or as little of their process as you need. Of course, excellent pricing and really talented teams. Very cool company. Check them out. InsightSutras.com. Thanks so much for sponsoring this episode. All right. So, April, let's get into it. Now, here's what I know. You grew up on a farm in West Texas, which is already kind of interesting and cool. But somehow you go from the farm in West Texas, you find your way into this crazy world of insights and starting a company. So, how did you first get your start? And take us on your journey.
It's interesting because when you tie it to my background of farming, what comes to my mind is I probably grew up in, the realm of thinking about bringing a tiny seed of a product to life all the way to like fruition or growth. And I did that every year, like our family was really unified by the idea of bringing something new to life and all the operational logistics of making that happen. Um,
Sure.
but that was not really my path, was to stay in necessarily the farming community. And I probably was, well, I was an education major, and I ended up working for a electric company in the time frame of the deregulation of Texas electricity, and
Uh,
and that was in gosh, I was in my late 20s at that point. And I was already working for that company doing leadership development for youth.
okay.
And when we were going through that process, then it became clear that the community service youth program was going to be eliminated, and we were going to start doing consumer marketing. And so they hired on my floor this entire team of consumer marketing, very well adept genius marketers from P&G and like Ivy League, those who had a degree that I did not. And in my desperation to keep a job, I just kept knocking on the VP's door, asking if he could give me a job on his team. And so he finally acquiesced and decided to put me on the underneath the statistician that was going to be trying to understand and uncover the way to move into marketing. And so I got my initial ropes in learning how to do SPSS and even
Yeah.
teaching some of the others because it was kind of like the grunt job, if you will. And but I got into qual because they had a consultant come in and they were trying to understand consumers. And I was sitting in the back room and I listened to this moderator and I watched her literally kind of change the way that everyone in the world of electricity had thought about it through
Yeah.
her qual work. And I was like, that's what I want to do. It just like hit me. And so I asked if I could do that. I asked her if she would give me a job, and she's like, I don't hire my clients. No. And and interestingly enough, I ended up going to Peru. I got a severance package because I didn't want to, um, you know, stay in that same realm that they had ended up putting me in. And I taught school for a year. The day that I came back, that same woman who I wanted to go work for her qual practice, she emailed me and said, I've got job openings. Would you like to interview to be a moderator? And I was like, absolutely. When do you want me to do that? So that's how I got started. That was like 22 years ago. And so that's a little bit about my story moving into the business.
Yeah, what an amazing story.
Mhm.
And then at some point you decided to go off on your own. Tell us about that.
Well, I probably would have stayed with that firm forever. I loved it because, being around a group of moderators, but then having our own clients kind of gave me that flow that I liked.
Yeah.
But they were purchased by, or there was an acquisition by Ipsos.
Okay.
And I was at the same time going through to get my executive MBA. And the reason I had gone back to get my MBA is because I was so burned out from being on the road constantly as a moderator
Yeah.
that needed something to almost ground myself in. And so that's what I chose. And
Yeah.
then, so during that time, I was, trying to manage school. I had met what became my husband. And then I was trying to moderate. It was just too much. So I decided that I was going to, during that acquisition, just focus on my schoolwork and then take a breather and see what I wanted to do. Um,
Sure.
and then, to be honest with you, going through that program probably expanded my thinking on like maybe I can do something else other than this. Maybe I don't want to stay in it. I was so burned out. But then
Sure.
what happened was a friend of mine in the electricity business, in the energy business, was asked me to do a project that was I was able to do and still stay with integrity on my non-compete. And
Okay.
so I ended up doing some tracker studies, and that's how I started my business, just by doing some tracker studies, which was kind of getting me back into the quant world. Um,
Sure.
and so it started, my business started almost by happen chance, if you will. Like I wasn't expecting it, like I was
Yeah.
expecting or intending to be a moderator.
Yeah. So it was like the project that launched the company, right? It's like,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, cool. And here you are over 18 years later, and it's a nice, thriving business. So I I have to ask you about this book because I really enjoyed it. And I think it's really interesting to hear your backstory and to hear how much quant you were involved in early on. But clearly along the way, you really found your voice and your point of view in terms of how you think about innovation and insights, and the role that empathy plays, which is really cool. I'd like to ask you about one of the stories in this book because um, there's lots of great stories, and like I said, I feel like I know you better, but there's one that I just found so fun and interesting and kind of funny, and I'd love to hear you tell it here and a little bit about the lesson that you learned. So you were talking about studying abroad. I think you had just finished college. You're going to Europe. You're going to meet your host family, and there was, let's say, mismatched expectations in terms of what you thought you were walking into and what they thought they were getting. You want to tell that story?
Yes. It's funny when you mentioned it. I was thinking probably the why I like qual so much is because I was born with this question in my mouth called why. Like I just wanted to know why everything. And so when you said that about the story, that was the question that I had in my head is like why. I ended up deciding that I wanted to do this 6 month program through the 4-H Extension Service. So it was called IFFY, and you lived with different agriculture host families for several weeks at a time, and it was like a study abroad program. So I was independently studying as I was kind of working with them or learning from them in terms of the culture. That was the purpose of the program.
Sure.
But what happened was the very first family that I came to live with was just this surprise. So I was 21 and it was my third year of college, and I was going expecting all of these like great adventures. And I get off the plane, the guy picks me up, and the father, and then he takes me straight to the house. And even the girl that was going to be staying with another family, they took both of us, and they immediately gave us hoes, like a hoe that you hoe weeds with,
Right.
on a turn row. And he just gave it to us, and he told us to go out into his field and begin hoeing the weeds out of the onion field. They had onions, that was part of their crop. And I was jet lagged. I had had all these like sights and sounds. I was fresh off of a farm in West Texas, had not even gone very far from for college. And I was kind of hit with like, I'm back in my father's field, but in Holland, and I'm like somehow paid for this. Like, what is happening right now? Like, why? And so it was just this kind of revelation to me, which is, sometimes I get emotional saying it. Like sometimes I don't know what the point of the book that I said at that point, but what's coming up for me now was, sometimes we are faced with our own challenges, no matter how far away we get from home.
Right.
And and it causes us to, really consider like where was the communication uh, missing so that we could have a better alignment on what I was expecting. It was fine. It worked out. I did end up spending the 3 weeks there, but it was
Yeah.
one of the most, you know, eye-opening, insightful experiences that I had on that trip.
Yeah, yeah. You were probably it's like, oh, I'm gonna see the world, right?
Yes.
And instead it's 8 a.m. sharp. You're in the
Yeah.
middle of the hoe and you're tilling the weeds and yeah, good times.
I was not about to tell my father that he was right in that I could just experience a lot of what I wanted to experience at home, because that was actually what happened.
Too funny. Too funny. Cool stuff. Let me ask you, what prompted you actually to write the book?
Well, I could tell you logistically and then also internally, kind of, I think, how it came to be.
Sure.
Unlike me saying I want to be a moderator, it came separately in that uh, internally, I was working through a process starting in 2019 when I was going through a divorce of trying to, I guess, um, discover who I was.
Right.
I think I'd spent a lot of time discovering who other people were. That was I guess, my life's work. And during my divorce, I had this like unusual opportunity to discover myself. Much of that was because during the divorce, I had kind of come to my church as a place of peace, a place of finding better connection both with community and with, God. And
Sure.
during that time frame, I didn't I did not have the opportunity to have that be a place that was helping me with my pain. I wouldn't say ostracized from the church, but definitely I didn't feel accepted in what my experience was. A lot of people telling me what my experience was versus me being able to voice it. Some of that was my own and a lack of being able to voice my own experience because I still was not knowing it. So my writing, have you ever heard of Julia Cameron?
No.
Okay, so Julia Cameron is this inspiration, and I'll probably butcher her story, but she created this book called The Artist's Way. And she did that when she herself was going after post-divorce. She had written a script that then became utilized without her consent, that became a popular movie. And so she wrote this book instead when she was in the mountains of New Mexico with her daughter, trying to work it out, for herself, like what's going to happen. And say it again.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, and so the point of her whole book is writing 3 pages every single day,
Yeah.
no matter what, helps you to kind of uh, almost understand yourself and also connect with God. And I found that to be the case, and that was the premise for which probably the book became a part of my what became a published. But then
Sure.
the logistics of it were that during COVID, I was so, oh my gosh, just lonely. In you'll see in you read in the book that I had moved to this new home and this new community, and then COVID hit and we were kind of isolated with like 2 horses in our backyard. and
Yeah.
and so I think that I wanted to spend time with other people who were going through tremendous change and not knowing how, and to create kind of almost these empathy conversations. So within that, there's a circle of women who we together kind of walked through each other's challenges through this kind of empathic process. And then finally at the end, they were like, we want to do this for you, because everybody had a spotlight where we kind of worked them through. And so my job was the facilitator, and then they facilitated me at the back end, which was such a, it was such a gift. And so
Yeah.
that was how it ended up being, is then at the end of my process, they were like, you need to write a book. And so it kind of came out of me without it being intentional. Like others and community is how it came.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. That's great. Sometimes you just need that spark, right?
Yes.
Now, speaking of, you mentioned you're kind of alluding to spirituality. Now, I understand this is a topic that you want to explore in more depth from here. Is that right?
Yes. I love your questions. They're so direct. I think it's funny because I think it's a topic that feels very scary for me to approach in a business setting. But in some ways, I feel like the idea of spirituality and awakening our own like soul, our own purpose, our own growth is as much a piece of our work as it is a piece of our like separate from work life. At
Sure.
least that's what I've started understanding after, studying other things, like studying empathy for the purpose of product development, studying empathy for the purpose of relationship development, studying empathy for the purpose of child development, for everything else. Like the overarching umbrella for me seems to be that empathy and spirituality have some connection that I haven't quite uncovered, and I'm so curious about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. So, where do you think that might take you? Is that just waiting for the spark and then you probably have another book coming out of you, or what do you think?
Well, so I started with the book. The reason it's called the Firestarter is because I think that when we have a spark, insight to me is around spark. That, oh, I see a different thing that I didn't see before. That's why I like qual.
Yeah.
When my teams feel that spark individually and then together, then I see things change. Like I see change happen towards abundance. Okay, so then I think that spark happens when we have empathy for our external who we're trying to help, but then also the people around us who are trying to make it come together like teams. And then also when we have like empathy for ourselves, right? Like our own leadership, if you will. And so um, as I think through all of those things, I can see that the idea of becoming sovereign, meaning we get clarity within and with our teams, having an impact that creates greater abundance for us as people, not just as companies or people
Yeah.
or organizations trying to make a profit. Like I think the future of, you didn't ask me this, but I feel like the future of insights is going to be led by those who have intention that is soulful, that is correct within themselves to create that, right? Like I feel like
Yeah.
insights is around spark. Well, what do we have a spark about? We have a spark about intent, what we intend to do. So I feel like intention is such an important component. So then if that begs the question of how do you create intention that is helpful, for yourself and others? And so that's where I think spirituality comes into place, because I feel like there's a greater connection of people when we understand on some level what that looks like to be connected, as humans.
Yeah. I feel that. I feel that. Cool. It's so much bigger than just doing a job, right?
I
Uh,
know.
yeah, sure.
But it's interesting because the reason I don't have as clear a statement on where I'm going with it is because I've learned enough about myself to know it's okay for me to be in the discovery of it.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I have intention to discover because I believe the truth of what I'm discovering. And every time I've showed up and believed the truth of what I'm discovering, then I think this thing called alchemy happens where I don't actually know exactly where that's going. But, like, I'll give you an example of how I believe that there's momentum in this idea of there's a client of mine who she told me about a year ago. She's the one that she's told me 6 years ago. I think that you need to be doing insights for culture, not just for research, not just for marketing. Like there's a culture component to insights that is important. And I have since then done a lot of stakeholder interviewing, which is so fun to learn the team's component of getting a creation made. Um, but when you ask me about where it's going, like I kind of went down this path of creating a digital course for leaders. And I found that that did not ever achieve momentum, right? So when you start to build something that's not achieving momentum, then you know that something you're still tweaking that. At the
Sure.
same time, I got asked by my client to get this certification called KAI, which is a statistical. Have you heard of it?
I have, but I'm not too familiar with it. So if you could explain it, that'd be great.
So I just finished the certification program and it's out of Virginia Tech. And it's this Dr. Curtin, who's not alive anymore, but his whole theory, his hypothesis, and then the tool came from this idea that creativity and innovation are not the same thing. Everyone's creative, we just have different styles of creating. There's an adaptive style and there's an innovative style. And some of us like to, on the adaptive side, create with boundaries or structure in place. And then there are those of us who like to create with outside of the boundaries and outside of the structure, and that neither are a that's a preference or a style. And then
Right.
further, there's a gap between that style. And if that gap is larger than a certain number of points, then there's a larger chance you're going to have disagreement. So, what I loved about this tool is because that's what I've experienced in 20 years of doing like team product qual projects is that, and you read that in my book probably, that when you have teams that don't necessarily have the same style,
Mhm.
they seem to have more conflict, and that perhaps that just acceptance of the style is maybe more of the problem than like people, just having uh, a lot of competitiveness in their nature, et cetera, because all of us have a nature of um, what I would call consciousness, like wanting to do good work in the world, et cetera. So then how do you pull that out of them in a way that's appreciative of themselves and other? So anyway, um, that's been a place that has kind of made me still feel like the momentum of working with teams for
Yeah.
insights versus working on insights alone is kind of where my, business is shaping up.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Hearing you talk through that and then thinking about the book, one of the things I really like about you, April, is that your brain is always working. You're always taking new information and you're putting it in other contexts and just trying to understand the world around you. And there's some people who get really calcified in terms of how they think, and that is definitely not you. I can tell.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that said, let me ask you this. I'm curious, when we aren't working, we're so often consuming media of all sorts of types, and that media can often inform our perspective and how we think, or it can just be, a great opportunity to shut off our brain for a while. So if you think about what media is earning your time, could be for insight, inspiration, or just pure enjoyment, what does your media diet look like these days?
Okay. Well, it's funny that you asked that because for the first time in a while, probably because it's summer, I'm reading three books at the same time, and it's been a while since I've done that.
Yeah.
So and then to your point, I probably have having a hard time reading books that help me shut off my brain, but one of them is Dan Brown's The Secret of Secrets. Have you heard of that? It's a
Um,
new one.
I'm not familiar with the new one. Nope.
I like it because he explores, different ways to see things, but it's, a romantic novel. So that makes me happy. And then I'm also reading The Awakened Brain, which oddly enough is around the same idea of like Lisa Miller trying to communicate about her journey into the study of consciousness, which I think is very fascinating. And then I'm also reading the book Flow. And and then I listened to Andrew Huberman's podcast like way more than most people should ever. Just his podcasts are very long. So if I'm ever on a long drive or whatever, I listen to him a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Super cool. Well, it is called the Rock and Roll Research Podcast after all, April, and there's one topic that we have not reached yet, but we cannot sign off without talking a little bit of rock and roll. So it doesn't have to be rock and roll. Don't let me bias you. But here's the scenario, April. You're stranded on a desert island. You have three albums of your choosing to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are
So I did think about this. Um, that is a challenging question. Stevie Nicks.
they? Ooh, nice.
The reason it's hard is because I'm like, okay, which one of these would I choose? Probably Belladonna. Probably because that was, I think, her first one where she kind of came out into her own.
Yeah.
Um, and then I didn't think about this, but probably Prince,
Yes.
1990. I don't know. Again, I have a really hard time knowing which album, but he's the only um celebrity I've ever cried for whenever we lost him. And then also I would say Nora Jones,
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Come Away With Me, her soul, I think she would move me through all of the things I needed to move through if I was on a desert island by myself.
Yeah, for sure. I have to say, I love those choices. I am from Minnesota, so the Prince call out is always appreciated, right? I did see Nora Jones once live,
Never
and
have.
the voice was so amazing. I can't even, it's like an instrument in and of itself.
Yes.
It was almost like an ethereal experience.
Yeah, I haven't even seen her, and that's how I feel when I listen to her. In fact, if I could do anything, I would learn how to sing just because she's such an inspiration on the way that her voice quality creates harmony inside you, is what I experience with her.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Excellent. Well, I'm so excited we had this chance to sit down and chat, April. It's a long time coming. And what's great is when we see each other again, I'm very interested to see where your thinking is then, right? So you always got new ideas, always working. So I'm sure I will see you soon here in DFW. I certainly hope so. So until then, April, rock and roll.